Most guitarists trying to build up speed are going to run into an issue with hand synchronization. So if you want your playing to sound more like this, and less like Kirk Hammett on those early Metallica albums, then this is the video for you. So this is a really common issue on guitar, and while I've seen a decent amount of good exercises for working on this, a lot of times the way we practice those exercises is more important than the things we practice themselves. So we're going to be diving into that today. So the first thing, as far as getting your hands in sync, you want to make sure that you've practiced whatever you're working on enough to where you're comfortable with it. You don't have to stop and think about what note comes next. You don't, struggle just getting into the right hand position, things like that. You want to make sure that you've got, that basic understanding of what you're working on going. So if you've skipped over that step, make sure you do that first. Otherwise, these things we're going through today aren't really going to help you much. So a lot of times people think of hand synchronization as kind of this mystical skill where if they find the right exercise, it'll just magically pull the two hands together. And it's not really like that at all. You have two obstacles to work with. You have your right hand and you have your left hand. I know, amazing, right? But seriously, it either comes down to your left hand rushing or dragging, or it comes down to your right hand rushing or dragging, or potentially both. So we're going to dive into how we will fix that. So on guitar, our right hand generally is what drives the rhythm for us. It's what keeps our sense of time going, and a lot of times the left hand just kind of follows along with it. So if you don't have a lot of control over your left hand, that's going to be 9 times out of 10 the biggest issue when it comes to building up hand synchronization. So if we know that the left hand is more likely the issue, how do we fix that? So we're going to start by taking whatever you're working on and trying to practice it just legato, so no picking involved. So what that's going to do is force your left hand to be really, really in control of what you're playing, both in terms of just the notes you're playing, but the timing as well. And so when you force your left hand to take control of the timing, it then really improves your ability to play through that well and then be able to put the two hands together. So I generally recommend starting out with just single string exercises to start, kind of like the Yngwie pattern I did in the beginning. Now, anyone who's been around the channel for a little while probably has noticed I've never covered any Yngwie. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but that sixes pattern that he's kind of known for is a really good one for approaching this, where we're staying on one string, and it also really works the control over your pinky, that finger independence, which will really help your overall left hand control. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, but feel free to start out with any other single string exercise. Generally something you can repeat a little bit more is going to be preferable, but really any single string exercise will do. So if you are doing that Yngwie style pattern, I'd start with just one position at a time. So just getting really comfortable with that one section, then working through the others kind of individually before starting to connect them together. Again, that's going to help develop your control, really make you comfortable with each one of those. And if you're kind of new to legato, maybe you don't do a whole lot of hammer-on and pull-off stuff, then it might be something where you can't really sustain that for very long, and this is really going to help to build up that endurance as you go. So once you are comfortable with each one, then start putting them together. So on and so forth. And as you're doing this, really make sure you're paying attention to keeping your timing solid. You want to make sure that you're not rushing, you're not dragging, and you have control over how fast you're playing. Because again, it's the control here we're trying to develop more than just our legato skills in and of themselves. So once you feel like you're starting to get comfortable with that, you can put it to a metronome and you can stay in time pretty well. Then it's time to start putting the right hand back in. So if you are doing this, you feel like you've got your left hand where it's pretty solid, the timing's good, you have good control over it, you put them together and maybe it isn't coming together, your hands aren't quite in sync, then maybe it is an issue of the right hand. And so from here, it becomes a little bit easier to fix that. So with the right hand, you're going to want to start out with maybe just even one note at a time, really focus on what rhythmic grouping you're going for. Again, if you're doing this example, it's going to be sextuplets, so 6 notes per beat. And you want to try to put a little bit of an accent on the downbeat. That'll really help to make sure that you're hearing clearly if you're in time with the metronome or not. So on and so forth. So if you feel like you've got the timing down there with just the right hand, no left hand involved really, then go back to putting them together and still try and keep that accent in there on the first note of each grouping. So on and so forth. Keep going with that. And having that accent in there really helps to make sure that you're staying in time with the right hand. So from there, if you feel like you're starting to get the hang of things along one string, you're able to keep your hands in sync, then you can start moving into patterns that do go across the strings. Now, I would recommend, again, if you're kind of newer to this, if hand synchronization is a big issue for you, then I'd start out with just lines that are all descending or all ascending, so not going back and forth between the strings quite a bit. So like that second part I did in the intro. Again, kind of another Yngwie style pattern there, taking that same 6-note grouping and just shifting it down one string at a time. So that could be a good place to start, but you want to avoid a lot of back and forth string changes, just because, again, as you're trying to build your hand synchronization, you don't want to kind of push things too far and start to build bad habits again. So I'd avoid any ascending 4s kind of pattern. Anything like that where you're going to be consistently going back and forth between the strings isn't really ideal as you're building that up. But once you start to get comfortable with just straight ascending or descending lines, then you can start working into more challenging ones from there. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more upcoming lessons, covers, all of that. And if you would like to learn more, go more in depth, feel free to message me about guitar lessons. I do offer private lessons both in person and online. So head over to my website for more information on that. Hope you all have a good one. See you next time.